Sign. Happy midday to all you listeners out there joining us from all parts around Texas and beyond. We're in cloudy and wet Austin, Texas, home of Keeping It Weird, of course. Most importantly, the Texas Military Department. We're not just keeping it weird here at Camp Mabry, we're keeping it real with Operation Warp Drive. A study and discussion of writing is both a practical and personal professional application, professional growth. I will first introduce the host and the leader of our little band and writing extravaganza, Colonel Brian Hildebrand, Commander DeVarty, and the Chief of Staff for Operation Lone Star. Colonel, I think you're down in Houston. I don't know if you're getting rain, but you're down there for INGAT. It's that INGAT time of year, isn't it?
It is that time of year. Yeah, getting ready. So I know a lot of peeps are either on the road to INGAT or are getting situated for day one here on Thursday. So it's looking pretty good. I'm excited for this weekend. It'll be great. So
yep. It's INGAT's it's almost a rite of passage. It was my first drill in 1988 with the Guard.
Whoa.
That tells you that it's that time of year. Huh?
Yes. Yes, it does. Yeah, baseball starting, INGAT starting. I love
That's
it.
Right.
So, hey, Chief, what we got on deck today? We're doing critical thinking, reading, and writing.
More of it, sir.
All right.
Can't have enough. You've got some great analysis to do, and let's get started.
Yeah, perfect. So, hey, folks, welcome to the Writing Roundtable. Of course, not just I can't do it myself. We got, Jared Krause, our AI extraordinaire. We got our legal counsel with Mariah Gagnon, and then we got Matt Cox. Keeping us straight on the technical side as well as providing over-the-top commentary as necessary. And then old TJ Clifton, he's hanging around here somewhere. He didn't got his picture up, but we'll find him. All right. So, hey, look, last session we introduced the 36 ID writing competition, right? So for all of you out there who are getting started on that, ping us, send us a note, let us know how it's going. Send us some questions, send us some comments. Maybe we can help you out. Because part of what we're doing today is we're going to discuss, hey, how do we read critically? How do we write critically? How do we think critically? They're all tied together. If you've done any staff work at the division level or higher, you know that critical thinking is at a premium, and you're often asked to do some type of predictive analysis based on historical trends and analysis and patterns, and they want you to predict the future, but you can't do that without critical thinking. So I think what we have on deck, first of all, is we're going to get to if you had to do a critique or you had to receive a critique, these are some steps that you could take to get after a critique per se. So I'm going to send it around the room here for a second, or across the table, I should say. Mariah, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I didn't see you last time because I know you were out. You had some drill going on, so we're gonna let you play catch up a little bit. So you'll be first in the docket here.
Yes, sir.
So you do, obviously, as the JAG, and you get a lot of papers. How difficult is it sometimes to kind of give that critique that you have to know you had to give without crushing somebody, maybe because they outrank you, right? And you're like, hey, I can't talk so plainly to this person, but also just because we're professionals and we everybody deserves kindness. So
absolutely.
What do you got?
So when I'm giving critiques, let's just give an example on an investigation, and maybe it's not this officer's forte. They don't write all the time. Maybe they're an infantry officer or some other MOS, not a JAG, obviously. I have to help them, but I don't want to do it for them. So it's usually a good learning experience for me and for the other officers. So I try to give them the chance, when I get it in, I'll look over it, give them some feedback, have them go back. But then after that, I'm going to maybe give them some red lines or some things like that would help with their, but it's hard for me sometimes because I want to change the substance, but that's not the part that I'm allowed to change. So, sometimes it's maybe I don't agree, but I'll talk it over and ultimately let the writer choose which direction. So I think it's a big part of the critique thing. Obviously they're required to come to me and get critiques, but thinking about who you want to get critiques from and how much of that you want to accept is an important part of writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a good example, doing legal work and working on some type of 15.6, because you do have some left and right limits. you know who your audience is. Your audience is the commander. You know what the burden is. It's the burden of proof, present facts. And so you know how you have to craft your article. Sometimes, and I'll throw this out to the table, who wants to take it next, but sometimes, we're working on something that maybe it's a paper for an academic paper. I know TJ's doing his PhD stuff. So TJ, like when you sit down with your professor who is mentoring you on your thesis, on your PhD level work, like how does that work out for you guys?
So it's really neat. I mean, it's similar to the military environment, right? Like what you mentor me on, and it goes down the line, right? So my dissertation chair has a doctoral degree, has been through the droves of what it takes to get there, so they have that experience. And normally they have multiple people that they're helping along that journey. So we sit and go over like, hey, this is a way.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is like they look at what you're writing about in your background, and they try to pair you with someone that has a lot of experience. So I was told to write about military stuff because then no one could argue against me. And so they made my dissertation chair as a retired major general. So I lost that thanks to Colonel Kelly. But yeah, I mean, it's really neat because it isn't all like this is not good. It's kind of like they walk you along the process. They tell you what you need, and then they even have examples for you. Like this is kind of how I approached it, or hey, when you get to here, don't think too far forward, but start thinking about the next step. Right. So it's a positive critique because they want you to complete it. Right. They're not like the people that protect the badges like we grew up under years ago. So,
yeah. So part of it is, you do have that relationship with and that's an important thing. Like, don't necessarily select some rando to be the receiver of your work and like expect them to give a critique. I mean, it definitely, there's definitely a strategy to like selecting who you should or who you should have read your paper, your work. So, part of it's this. Part of it's like if you don't set the stage for the person reading it, and they don't have the context of what you're trying to accomplish, then they're going to misguide you in their critique. So, say for example, you pick a subject matter expertise, right? But your paper, let's talk human resources for a minute, like change management. You say, hey, you know what? I have a friend. He's a senior consultant for one of the top 4 consulting firms, and he knows change management. He knows how to do that. He knows how to lead an organization through change. I want to talk about how in my paper I can take a unit from point A to point B and teach them how to redevelop culture and use principles of change management, right? Well, if you're going to use broad brushstrokes and army-centric terms in your paper, maybe the subject matter expert from the consulting firm is not the most appropriate person. Or if it is, you set the stage so that you say, hey, look, I'm doing broad brushstrokes. I don't want to go down rabbit holes on some of these things. I don't want to go too deep into this literature. I just want, this is my aim and goal. And I think, Mariah hit it. Like when you do a 15-6 and you're an IO for them, you know what your goal is. But when you're doing a paper, sometimes people don't know what your goal is. And so when you have to critique something, or you're asking somebody to critique that paper, it has to be within those guidelines or that context that you set for them. I don't know. What do you think, Chief? Do you think that makes sense?
Makes sense to me, sir. I think I was going to say something when the Colonel was talking, Colonel Clifton was talking, your piece at the top where it says grow as a writer. I mean, he has mentioned and showed me some of the sites that he's had in terms of working on that doctorate. How many times have you had to rewrite, sir? Can you give an approximate in your program?
There's been a lot of things that I've had to go back and rewrite because I mean, at the end of the day, you're trying to put together a lot of information, and you're trying to make it make sense and keep the reader involved. And sometimes the information you have fit at the time, but as you add more information, you may have to remove things. And I mean, to Colonel Hildebrand's point about the change management person, like if I'm writing a paper about how, the history of the band and its impact on the Army, I'm not going to ask Colonel Hildebrand to critique it, but long range precision fires, maybe, right? I'm not going to ask Matt to critique, something about the logistics world. I'll reach out to my wife because she understands it better. So when, know the person you want to critique it, if you want it to be something that people that have experience in that field are willing to say, yes, this is a good product.
Well, and I guess some of that point is you have the growth mindset of, I expect it to come back and I'm going to change it. So you went into that receiving critiques column with the mindset of, hey, I'm expecting to get more. So you're married to it. I think a lot of people, when you write, it becomes very personal. Hey, I'm writing about this. It's very personal. And going into that critique, there's an expectation that you're going to get something back, and it may be totally not what you're thinking. And being open to that.
But that goes into the first thing, resisting the urge to defend your work, right? One of the first things they teach you is know both sides of the argument, right? Just maybe you don't agree with it, but understand like what is the counter to what you're trying to argue, and listen to it fully. Don't just have your mind made up going in, because then you fail to receive, the full lens of what you're looking at from every angle. So that's how you grow as a writer.
Yeah. So I had a professor that talked about on the other side, the other column of giving critiques, that you want to be sort of a velvet brick, come out of this, be a velvet brick. I mean, how can you, it's not what you say, it's how you say it to them, because it can be personal depending on if you're taking somebody from the beginning through a longer process, if they're a younger writer or if they're just getting into this. And, you want to give them that correct information, like you're saying, or give them honest feedback without turning them off to the process. So two sides that are displayed on this page.
Yeah, that makes sense. I tell you too, and just so I throw this out there because this is what it's not. This is what critiquing is not. I remember as a student, many times in my career, whether it was high school or college or master's level work, even at the work college, and when the professor says, hey, give me your paper in advance, I'll read it for you and critique it, and what I was always very hesitant to do that, and my strategy was, man, if my teacher reads that multiple times over before I actually turn it in, I'm going to do a lot of work, right? A lot of significant work for maybe just a marginal increase in grade. Right. And here's the other thing, and this is difficult to manage. Like when you get your work critiqued by your teacher in advance, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, but just know up front what's going to happen is that they're going to have opinions on the topic as well. And so you don't necessarily have to sway to your instructor's opinion. They can opine just as well as you can. But what you have to be able to do is if you have to be able to back up your opinion. And if they're coming strong at you with their own opinion, maybe it's because your own substance didn't support your opinion. Does that make sense?
Does to me.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah. So let's say this, like when you get a critique from maybe someone you trusted with your paper and they come back and they're like, well, I think it's this. And this could even be an editor that you're working with on one of these journals. And they're like, well, you said this in the topic. This actually came through when I was working with one of the editors from Military Review. There was a paper an article I was talking about, and I was working with a junior editor, and I talked about I was using assess and evaluate, two different verbs, because the Army understands them differently, not interchangeably. And they said, no, you just need to say one, not the other. And I was like, no, they're different. And then I had to articulate to them why they're different. And so it was an education for the editor. They're junior to the staff, so they understood now. but it's also you got to hold your ground when you know you're right, and that can be difficult to do sometimes, especially when you know you're up either against a timeline deadline, or or you're novice to writing, and so you're trusting that the editor knows more than you. They do know more than you, maybe about the editorial process, but not necessarily about the content, if that makes sense. All right, did we beat that horse, Jared? What do you think? Are we dead with?
Yeah, I mean, is a horse truly dead though? Is it truly dead? No, and there's right. Y'all do things very differently than I do, right? I'll say I'm the younger one of the group, but not by much, right? Not by much. Me and the captain, the Jag, we're probably from the same generation. So for me, like I would have, right, when some of the stuff that I'm doing, I have apprehensions giving it to somebody else to look at it. Just the fear of, just like, do you want to give it to your professor early? So that's where I use some of the AI tools where I come in on that, where, hey, well, let me give this AI, hey, you tell me what you think.
Yeah, sure.
And exactly what you're talking about, is that AI even as a subject matter expert? And to be honest, right, they might not be. Maybe you need to tell it to.
Yeah, sure.
And so it kind of builds some of that confidence within yourself, so that way you're receiving critiques kind of the way you want to receive them. And then, right, okay, now I think I'm going down the right path. Now let me send it over to, let me send it to Colonel Hodebrand now. Let's see how, maybe I'll meet the mark better this way.
Yeah. That's good. That is true. And we're going to talk about, so that's a good topic. In a little bit, we're going to get into that artificial intelligence, because it's a tool. It's a tool that people want to use. I think it's a tool that sometimes people have some hesitation about using because it's the unknown. And, I don't want to get in trouble because I don't want people to think the chat GPT or whoever is writing my paper for me. But we will talk about that. First, though, I think next on the docket, we're going to get into okay, so I've been tasked to give a critique. I'm going to give a critique. Like, how do I go about doing that, right? Other than just the five kind of bullet points we put on this slide. Part of it is you're going to have to find the structure of an article. And we've seen some of this stuff before, not necessarily in this format, but in past episodes, we specifically talked about those two books, How to Read Like a Lawyer. I know Mariah's favorite, and Grad School Essentials, which basically were where we extrapolated 2 models for success that you could use as readers and writers out there, of basically how to quickly comprehend subjects, right? Or a book or an article. And so when we look at how to find the structure of an article, there's some other things that we want to look at too, right? And there's a couple reasons why we want to do this. So we can use this tool when we're giving a critique. It's very helpful. We get the paper from somebody, we look at their draft article, and we say, you know what? Let me summarize this first, right? We can also do this when we know we are researching for our own material that we're trying to build for our own article, and we have an article that we know we need to, like, hey, how do I find the structure of this article? Let me find out what's most important. And so this is a kind of a kind of visual graphic of when we look at the structure of an article, like what is it we're looking for. So there's 4 basic parts. You look at the structure, you look at some key elements, you review the rationale and arguments and logic, and then where does the author weight the information, right? Okay, so basic structure. Everyone sees it on the screen there, right? We're all familiar with this. Even back in elementary school, when they said, hey, how do you write a paper? Basic structure: intro, body paragraphs, conclusion, right? And then we start reading academically, we start reading professionally for our own respective branches. We start tearing this apart and we realize, okay, the introduction can be more than 1 paragraph. The conclusion can be more than 1 paragraph. There are multiple body paragraphs, right? Right. So we know that there's always a basic structure. We know there's always an intro. We always know there's body paragraphs and conclusion, but sometimes it gets a little nuanced and complicated because of the depth and scope of the material being written about in that article. And then we know there's like key elements, right? We know to look for a thesis, right? Hey guys, I mean, pop quiz. Where does the thesis always end up in a paragraph? Or where should it always end up? Last sentence, right? Last sentence, right? We look when we go into paragraphs, when we go to the intro paragraphs, whether there's 1, 2, or 3, we always look, if we're looking for the thesis, you go to the last sentence of each paragraph and say, is that the thesis? Nope. Is that one? Maybe. Is that one? I think it's this one. And then you go to it, right? And then when you look at the topic sentences in the body paragraphs, where are the topic sentences at? Well, it's always the first sentence of all the body paragraphs. It should be, right? And these are clues. These are context clues that we've used, writers have used over centuries, but it frames the content for us. And so when we look at the architecture of the article, we can figure out very quickly where things are. We have to paint a roadmap. So that's like the first thing you do when you find the structure of an article. You make that outline. You get after it. So Chief, you've torn some articles apart already. Is this some of these two things, like finding the basic structure and the key elements? Is that pretty simple for you, or am I making it sound like, am I making this sound like an easy task and it's a little bit more difficult than I'm making it sound like?
No, I think depending on the length of what you're reading, you could even get some of those context clues, as you said, from the preview, the glossary, the whole prelude
Abstract
piece. Yep. So I mean, I think for smaller stuff, I think it's fairly straightforward. If people, they still have to read it. It goes back to the old days when you could get the little books and it had the cliff notes in it. Right now AI, Krause get on AI, and Chief, you don't need to use the cliff notes anymore. But that basic key point, close it out. And I think it's pretty easy to find it, but people still have to read that stuff. They still have to process it.
Yeah, for sure.
But what's the supporting, right? Here's the main. Now here's the 3 supporting in this paragraph. If people have what you're putting on this slide right now, sir, if they weren't real familiar with it, they could take this slide and apply it to anything that they're reading and find it.
Yeah, sure. Yep. Yeah, and so when we look, and again, after we do the basic structure and the key elements, and we look at the architecture of this article, then we start saying, okay, what are the rational arguments? Where does this logic lie, right? And for the most part, you should be looking like, how do I clue into these pieces? Well, you should be looking for quotations or citation boxes, right? Any place where you see like a footnote, any place where you see quotes in a paragraph, that's going to clue you into evidence. Because in order to support a rational argument, or order to support your logic, you typically have to have a quotation. You got to have backup. You got to call in. You got to phone a friend. TJ, I know you've been phoning lots of friends for that PhD work you're doing. At what point do you reach when you're writing a paragraph? Is your quote too long? And it's like, is this really even my paragraph anymore?
So yeah, I mean, we don't direct quote. We paraphrase and we cite it. But yeah, I mean, there's some, and that's the hard part, is because like you'll use a quote and then you'll explain it, but sometimes the way like you would want to explain it is exactly what it says. So it's like, wait a minute, now I have to kind of change some of the things I wanted to say. But yeah, to your point, like you can't, in order to back up or reinforce any type of point you're trying to make, there has to be information that supports it. Yeah, I mean, it's like there's case law that supports law stuff, and we have to use peer-reviewed articles, right, that have already been published. We can't just go to Google and I can't get on your X and be like, well, Colonel Hildebrand said this, so it must be true. So it is. I mean, there are instances. I think if it's more than three, if it's more than 2 sentences or 60 words or something like that in APA format, you have to go ahead and create that little indentation.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's a direct quote from
Yeah.
literature. But yeah, I mean, I'm up to, I think I've got like 35 articles that have been cited in this dissertation so far. And that I only keep about half of what I've read, just because some
Yeah.
don't make sense. But one of the things about, I mean, it's not so much the structure of an article, is if you want to know whether or not it's an article you want to read, a lot of them now, you have the abstract, which is the first part. And you kind of say, okay, this is what I'm looking for. And then I immediately do a Control F and go to findings, right?
Yeah.
Now I can say this is, or type in findings or conclusion, something like that, that lets me know what again, Quentin Tarantino it. I read what the outcome is, and then I'll go back and pull pieces from it to use. So yeah.
I'll tell
Yeah.
you that Control F thing. You know, I will dime myself out that I was at my first staff course where I ever used Control F. But all these young guys, these young warrants, these young pilot warrants were, hey, Chief, just Control F. Just Control F. So what are you talking about, man? And so, I mean, what a great thing to have doing what you're doing, because I know I didn't have it for a long time.
Sure. Hey, Chief, that even works on a Commodore computer. So when you do Control F,
It was an Apple IIe, sir. An Apple IIe.
No, I'm glad there's this conversation on quotes, because I think so. There's a couple things you need to think about here too, right? And this kind of goes into critique, but it's also, you could use this analysis for writing. So, true or false, Matt Cox? You tell me. The bolder the claim, the more evidence that you need to back it up.
Yeah, I would say that's true, sir.
Yeah.
If you've got something that could be perceived as so outlandish that it's not, there's no way it's possible, then yeah, you absolutely have to supply as much evidence as possible to get your reader to agree that yes, that whatever it is that you're asserting is in fact true, or could be true.
That's right. So if like we want to do like a football analogy, and we keep talking about how the Army beats the Navy and the Army has a better football team, right? We could look at a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
We could look at the historical record, which I don't know if we want to do that if we're trying to make that argument. We could look at individual statistics of the players on the team. We could look at the composition of the teams. We could look at the injury rosters. We can look at their out-of-district performance versus in-district performance, all these different things. I mean, Jared, tell me where I'm wrong here. I mean, when Army beats Navy, right? I mean, it's a bold claim, and I'd need a lot of evidence to back that up, right?
I think
You
we look
would.
at the
So
last-
it's funny you made that claim, and so I go through my subject matter expert. So I just asked ChatGPT, who's better at football, Army or Navy? Right, broke down categories and everything. Overall series, Navy leads.
Yeah,
Right,
I know.
last 10 games. Right, Navy won 6, Army won 4. I don't know. You tell me. But
Yeah.
whenever you look at that, right? Also, it's all subjective, right? What are we looking at? Are we looking at the amount of Navy people who went on that stayed in the Navy and became earned high remarks and became really started shaping the face of the Navy? Or we're looking at that for Army? How many people came out of these programs that changed the way the Army and the Navy work on later on? So I think that's where, if you're gonna make a bold claim, sometimes you want to make a bold claim.
Sure.
And then you draw those people in to want to read your article, and then you break it down that way. Turns out there's more Medal of Honor winners that played Army football than Navy football.
Sure.
And that's ultimately what you're trying to get across. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
but yeah, it definitely says Navy. It says Navy, by the way, just in case anybody was wondering. Navy.
I would say here that you've got to kind of be careful in what evidence you choose to find and use to try to prove the assertion that you're making. So like Sergeant Krause said, yeah, Navy may have won 6 out of the last 10 games, but prior to that, the Navy won 10 out of the last 20 games, right? So You
Right.
you just have to be careful what evidence that you're using to back up your claim.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, right? And it kind of gets us to our next point of this architecture. Like when you're starting to review the rationale, you're starting to review their arguments, you're quantifying their logic in terms of how, the number of quotes they have, or the legitimacy of the quotes. Because like Jared said, you start, you can use ChatGPT and it can find you some sources. Maybe you got the right sources. Maybe you're using Colonel Hildebrand as a source, which is probably not very legitimate. But but then you also have, like, in some, like, when you look at these articles, like, where are they spending the weight of their effort? Like, what are they really weighting? And in the Army, we understand, like, weighting the main effort. Like, hey, you put all of your resources behind the main effort. You make it the biggest, boldest thing you got to go tackle the obstacle. Well, this is the same thing in writing, right? You're going to weight what you think is most important in your article. And if you're critiquing it, you're going to look for the total number of paragraphs spent on one part of the subject, one part of the story that the writer is writing about. If you're writing it, well, that's what you would do. You would spend a lot of time. You'd give it a lot of space on the page for that important part of what you want to discuss. So there's something to be said just when you count up, just straight up, just count the number of paragraphs that the writer spends on each of these. And so then you have these outcomes, right? And you ask yourself, like, and so this is where you kind of get in some of the critique, how this finding the structural article helps you build your critique. Is the outline of the article apparent, right? And what does that tell us about, if the outline is not apparent, what does that tell us about the composition of this article, folks? What does it tell us? What do you think, Mariah? That is what?
I think if it's not apparent, it can be very disorganized and difficult to
Oh, yeah.
understand. So that would be some feedback that I would give. But in the legal world, like when you're looking for those rationale to back it up, I mean, we call it authorities. Like, where's your authority? You know, that's like the first thing we think about. Like, what's the authority? And a lot of times the arguments that we're making, maybe it's not black and white, maybe there isn't evidence, but you have to compare and contrast, the case law to say this is similar because of this, or this is different and this case law applies. So I think the organization is a big part of it. And like when I went through law school, they taught us they called it book brief. So you read, a case and you put little notes on the side. And I still do that to this day when I'm reading like people's work that they want me to critique. I put on the side like a little note for myself so that when I'm done reading, I can like find those sections if they, mention something later. So,
Hey, and sir, one of the things too, we're talking about this writing piece, is that when you take it to the point of publishing, you can't take back what's written. So that whole the research thing and the organizational piece, the structure that you're talking about, having that logical flow, having that mapped out, having that critiqued to get to that final piece is so important, because unlike watching a video or a news clip or listening to this, there are things that are left out of that because you don't see the research that has or has not gone on behind it to make that point. I think we're used to seeing things visually and people telling us stuff, and it's very, very quick, and you make those snap judgments, where if you can get somebody to actually sit down and read something that's well thought out and well structured and well articulated, it carries so much more weight if it's been researched, that it's a much stronger conclusion, and it's a much more valid point of view.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, Chief. And if, let's say, like, Chief, you turn something into me and I'm like, hey, Chief, is your thesis this ? When you get that back in a critique, right? Should you be concerned that someone doesn't really understand what your thesis is or what your main ideas are?
100%.
Yeah. So that means some significant rework, right? And I mean,
sir, if it was you, it just depends on who it is, right? If it's you, if it's Kraus, well, maybe is it a user error? You know what I'm saying? I don't know. Maybe I got to get Clifton to be a third party here. I don't know.
That's right. That's true. But yeah. But is it Kraus really talking, or is it ChatGPT?
You never know.
That's right. Yeah. So, so that point number 2, outcome number 2 is you can easily identify that thesis and the main ideas of each paragraph, right? You should be able to extrapolate that. The logic and rationale should make sense. It should be sequential, right? And I don't want to get into like different logical arguments here, but I think in the material for the audience, these are some of the slides we show up for you guys, but actually in the MS Teams in the SharePoint site, you can actually download the full deck, and it actually talks about different logical arguments and biases to be on the lookout for when you look at that. And then, when we talk about, hey, if this person's going to spend 5 paragraphs on a topic, right? Does that match with the outcome, right? Or is the outcome hinge on only a topic where they only spent 2 paragraphs on, right? So it has to be balanced. It has to be balanced at the end where your boldest claim, your biggest argument, where you think is the most important, you've spent the most time on. It cannot be that you think the most important thing is only worth 1 paragraph and everything else is just filler. And sometimes it happens, right? And inadvertently we do that because we will spend so much time in our papers establishing context, right? Because we're writing for the audience. And we've always been told since elementary school, hey, especially when we had to do those assignments where it says, tell us how'd you make something, right? And we had to do like an instructional paper, and we had to write out the teacher was grading us on how well we wrote out every single step, right? And it kind of gets the whole story of give a mouse a cookie trail. It's like, geez, like this story goes on forever. And so it's easy to get lost when you're trying to set context. You're like, no, I got to have this paragraph so they understand this paragraph, right? And this kind of connects to something we've said before on a previous episode. Like when you're writing for a general officer, you have to get to the point. Get to the point, right? Do not waste a whole bunch of time setting context. You have to know what the appropriate level of context is. So, TJ, talking about the appropriate level of context. How long is your thesis? How long is your PhD paper right now? Like 22 pages?
It's about 60 pages right now.
60 pages. Goodness.
So, but
That's a
that goes back to the first page about not taking it personal. But at the end of the day, like, right, like you have a limited amount of time, right? And then you choose to spend your time like focused on working on something and putting time and energy into it. So, whether it's a paper for, an Army school or a dissertation or whatever it is, even like, you remember doing like elementary school, high school, whatever, not getting a positive grade, knowing that you put in the effort, like it takes away from, it's hard to not take it personal. But yeah, I mean, I just think it's interesting because you can choose to grow from it, but at the same time, like if I chose to spend time not hanging out with my family and writing on this paper, and you're telling me it's not very good, now I'm going to take a little bit of offense. I'm just saying,
Yes, I hear you, bro. I hear you. All right. All right. Anything else here, folks? Because we're gonna turn loose our creative powers and let Jared talk to us about AI. But I just want to make sure I've touched everything here we wanted to touch. What do you
I
guys?
just have one tiny little point, sir. I would just
Do
say this discussion just only strengthens the argument to actually make an outline. I hate doing outlines. I find them annoying, but I still do them when I'm writing something really important, and it just shows you like if you do actually outline whatever you're doing, it's going to end up better. So I'm just putting that out there.
True that. I understand. I'm the same way, Mariah. I will find myself doing bubble charts first, like bubble ideas, and then getting into that line because I just don't just go out and throw an outline down. That's not my style. So completely understand. Anything else? We're good. All right. Hey, we're gonna turn this over to Jared for a minute, and he is going to take us down the rabbit hole of artificial intelligence. Hop away, Jared.
The captain probably could not have made a better segue into this unknowingly, right?
Oh,
exactly
yes.
what you're talking about with an outline, right? Is it easy to make an outline? Is it easy to keep your thoughts straight, right? So, right, there's some examples of different AIs that are out there, right? The official Army Camo GPT, right? You have Grok, you have Chat GPT, right? Copilot. There's 1,000 different AIs that are out there, right? And it's
Mhm.
like talking to 1,000 different people. And so, right, AI used the right way. It's that tool. So
Mhm.
AI is right. It's right. So one of the things I did is prepping for this, and I said, "Hey AI, give me some examples of what was it called? It was basically a source. Find me a source for this." Now the problem with AI, there's some do's and don'ts with that, right? Right. AI can help you format a citation that you already found. AI can help you put it in the right, is it right? Is it APA? Is it MLA? Things like that, right? And it can also double check your source to make sure it exists. But if I write something like, yeah, I'll have an outline and I want to write about, right, we'll say about the military using technology and how it integrates in. Someone might have wrote an article about that, like what's it, the fourth domain? So I can say, hey, give me this and then find me some sources and cite them. AI might just make them up because it's trying to give me what I want as quick as I possibly can. And it will just make up the sources. So I said, well, hey, right, structure this and also give me some sources. So it literally made up an author, a date, a made up book, and gave me the page number of this made up book that the source came from.
Sure.
And
'Cause
so
it's
that's where
generative
like
AI.
right, AI made it
Yeah.
up, right? It's like,
It's
right, it's
creative.
like when you're
Yes.
talking to me, you're like, did Jared just make that up? Like, there's no way that's real. He had to have just made that up. And so that's like the responsible side of it, where, I have 1,000 thoughts in my head. How do I get that outline? Well,
Yeah.
great, right? I kind of throw up into AI and I said, hey, give me some structure, give me some outline. How do I need to refine this? And using tools like that help you go down and start refining more and more of your own individual writing.
Yeah.
So, like the fourth domain, right? We were talking about this, right? So I was like, hey, I found this really cool article, the fourth domain. Show me some key points on it. Tell me what you think. So I ran it through a couple different AIs, a couple different models and everything. It's just the way that it processes data. And the AI's take on it was different every time. So one of them was, right, it is a monetization argument. One that runs a little bit more deep thinking of let me think more about what you're telling me to do. You give me more time to ponder.
Yeah.
It basically said that it was a very forward thinking evolution, right? The exact same article, right? So going back to that critique, where do I want to, right? What do I want my writing to be?
Sure.
And then I said, well, hey, give me some critiques. And it gave a couple of different critiques. Well, maybe improve on this or improve on this. And then I said, give it to me, critique it through the eyes of an AI expert. And it came with completely different things about you need to talk about adaptability of AI and all these other things that you probably wouldn't think about if you just go through and read it to begin with. Maybe your target audience is AI. Maybe it's not AI. Maybe it's just to kind of spark that conversation of going down of, am I going the right way to say, hey, we need to revolutionize how we're doing our processes.
Sure. Yeah.
And
That's
so, and
interesting.
then, right, exactly, right. And then does it meet certain criteria? Does my article that I wrote meet this criteria?
Yeah.
And so, right, so I ran it through, right, the four things that we were just talking about, right? Outline as apparent, right? AI says, right, fourth domain, outline as apparent, the thesis is clear, rationale and logic make sense. Now, the biggest weighted ideas might need to use some work on it. And so, and it says exactly what it is, right? Are these conceptual ideas or are they empirical or data driven resources?
Yeah.
Exactly right. If we're going to make a bold claim, we can see that early on. If I'm making a bold claim that we need to power automate everything and get rid of every HR person out there, if I'm going to write an article like that, I probably need to make sure I have a lot of data behind it. And so, but I mean, it can make you look like like a subject matter expert in something, but what it doesn't help you with is critical thinking. Exactly what we hit on earlier. You have to have some critical thinking, even in the way that you interact with AI.
Yes,
If I
true.
ask broad questions, I'm going to get broad results. If I'm looking up a recipe for chicken soup and in the same thing, I start talking about something else, it's going to confuse AI. And it's going to be like, oh, are you referring to chicken soup or are you referring to, military domination in the cybersecurity realm?
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm glad you ran the fourth domain through AI and asked the outline, because I'm sure, and hearing the results. I mean, because if you were to ask the author of the fourth domain, they said, "What is this article really about?" That author would probably say something like, "Well, when we look at the education of soldiers across the army, and we talk about the domain of the how we do professional military education, there's a self-development domain, there's an institutional domain, like we go to school at the army, and then there's like the experiential domain." And so I think that, in my opinion, the author of the fourth domain would probably have said, like, the whole point of having a fourth domain is it's a fourth thing. You got to consider technology, because a pencil is technology. A wheel is technology, right? Paper cups are technology. We invented those somewhere along the line, hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago. And so just like we now have technology that we're dealing with AI or cyber or, cruise missiles, technology never goes away. It needs to be considered a fourth domain so that we always know and how to deal with technology. I mean, if I had to guess what that author was trying to say.
You seem to know a lot about it, sir. It's almost like you would say we need to grow leaders who innovate with tech as a second nature.
Yes, that is very true. Yeah. What do you think, Chief?
I think as somebody texted me and said, "You guys are talking about Skynet." Right? That's what somebody just texted me. There was, I think you guys are talking about Skynet. This technology is the fourth domain, right? But
Yeah.
no, sir. It's a tool. These are all tools that we have to continue to adapt to, but really get to adapt to us in a way.
Yeah.
What you're talking about, broader picture. I have not gotten past. I'll admit to Kraus and to everybody on here. I haven't gotten past where I'm writing something and I'm using these tools then to clean it up almost in an organizational format like we discussed on a previous slide. And then I take it back and then I touch it up some more. I have not delved past the one creative thing I was curious about was preparing for something. And I asked the chat GPT to write me a letter based off a 36th Division ID, soldier the night before the Rapido River is part of a, something for a program, for a musical program. And it was an incredible what it wrote, and it felt very real, but based on historical context. But I have not done anything past that with it because I just don't trust, where does that go and how it's researched. I'd rather put content in and modify content out.
Well, that's an amazing distinction, because if we think about that, right? So what Jared talked about and what you just referenced, Chief, is you're using AI in a very creative sense. AI is generative. It's designed to generate things. It's supposed to model. It's supposed to be a creator. AI is supposed to create. These GPTs are, right. Grok, ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, Camo. They create, right. They're not necessarily scientists. They're not necessarily the subject matter expert in the field that you want to write about, right? And so you can use them as a tool to help you. You can say, hey, I'm researching this article. I don't have time to read it. Hey, Chat GPT, right? Summarize this article for me, please. Give me an outline. All right. And so here's what you have to be careful with, right? Just like the example that Jared provided about the author of the fourth domain and that article, right? Chat GPT, they got it wrong. That was not right. Right? You cannot put your entire trust in the technology.
Right.
Which is, I think, actually, if you read the Fourth Domain article, it'll actually tell you that you got to have a human in the loop. You got to be that person, right? And even if you look at all these initiatives that are taking place right now across, all Army Small Business Initiatives or AFC or Army Applications Lab, and they talk about these different companies, there always has to be a human in the loop, right? The Army we will never let machines decide for us. We are the deciders. And so even when we do this writing, even how we do these things, that's one of the dangers you have to be careful with and how to use it. So Jared, you had some other ideas about AI you're going to talk about, like maybe citations or something like that too, right?
Yeah, kind of way right. We kind of touched on that citation part, but it's like, it might grab the wrong citation. It might say, well, hey, I found this article, I'm going to cite it, but it actually pulls a citation that goes to a different article. And, and even Microsoft, right? They wrote an article about losing that critical thinking. And that's kind of where it's at. The AI we have right now doesn't have that critical thinking.
But it does have the creative thinking.
It has
right?
creative thinking, but not critical thinking, because it doesn't have those feelings that we have. It doesn't have the knowledge and understanding the way that we do, right? I'm Navy. I go back and I look at Admiral Rickover, the father of the nuclear Navy. He said, right, machines are wonderful, powerful tools, but they will never replace a human, because a human understands and processes knowledge and data differently.
Yeah.
And that's huge. And so, with everything that we do, right, AI is a tool. It's never a replacement. And that's what it is, right? And even in like some of the power automations and stuff that we're using, we have stop checks where the human has to validate the machine did what it needed to. And then, I validated. And then, it speeds up processes for us, but it never replaces that human mindset of it. It's never going to replace the mindset of the artillery guy sitting down range to press the button to shoot off, what is it, missiles y'all shoot off or bombs or whatever it is, right? Rockets, right? It's never going to replace that of the individual on the ground understanding the environment that they are in.
But here's what's crazy, right? And this is the Skynet reference that Chief made, is that AI is always learning. So as it watches you make that decision, guess what it's going to try to imitate?
It's going to try to learn, what was it? What? And then what it does, it says, oh, was it the weather? Was it the wind? Was it, let me look, what was it? What did it look like? That plastic bag looked like a little kid.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say, sir. We're at a point with AI right now where it's still new, so it's not going to be perfect. So while Grok may be really good at producing a picture of a flying cat, maybe it's not so good at giving me NCOAR bullets. But Grok's not going to get any better if I don't use the tool and try to teach it, or if the information doesn't exist somewhere for Grok to pull it into. So, we talked about writing and publishing articles. If we don't write and publish articles for Grok to go then try to resource information from, then it's not going to learn and get any better to help, future generations.
And Matt, I think you and I talked about this a couple weeks ago, but you said like in some of your ILE papers or maybe AOC papers, you were saying that you can even, like, if you use ChatGPT, you can use that, you can cite ChatGPT, right? Or you can cite one of them.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. So CAC has approved AI tools for professional writing, and they've outlined exactly how they want you to quote it and source it. But it is now an official tool to be used for professional writing.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, that's good. Which is good because that leads us kind of into it's a perfect segue into like how do we, summarize how we're going to put something together. So when you're critiquing an article or you're receiving a critique, it's usually going to come back in the form of a summary, right? And so this is just a quick visual of what that summary may look like. And so I'm going to sit back. I'm going to let Chief talk a little bit about this. Chief, when you look at this, all right, you've summarized articles before, Chief. What resonates here? What pops out on the page, right? I can tell you, I mean, I'm big about conciseness and key points, but what do you got, brother?
For me, it's the the connection and the logical flow. I mean, if you're summarizing, going from beginning to end, which is what most people do, hey, as you said, find this. Where's the key sentence here? Where's the key point here? Where's the key point? Almost bullet point them. Okay. Try to avoid opinions and interpretations from my end as somebody that's summarizing it. And if it's a well-written article, it will do it itself.
Yeah.
It occur organically, basically.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me, it's summarizing. It's like a seek and find almost. I think we lost him.
Yeah, I think we did. I will say on the previous slide, with the AI piece, you said it wasn't always right, which means Army's actually better than Navy. So that's good. That's
Well, I have its own GPT. I'll give them that one. It's a good try. It's a good try.
Yeah. Hey, sorry, I got disconnected for a sec. So, anything else? I mean, I don't want to belabor these points. I mean, we've been hitting a lot of these things up until this point. We've hit these on previous episodes. Anything I'm missing here, folks? Before I do want to end this session by talking about a couple things. One of them being the 36th Infantry Division riding competition, and the other kind of doing a little quick plug for INGAT. But
I'll tell you one other thing, sir. I mean, and you said, and you've got it on here. But if you're doing this, depending on what exercise you're doing it for and what it's for, you know, a lot of that information that's found in those sources. I know people sometimes see things that are cited and they don't really follow up on them. It's like it's like reading books, and sometimes the things that the stuff at the bottom of the page is almost more interesting than what's on the page. And so you're saying kind of check sources and recognize the big ones and so forth and so on. You know, that can lead you on a great chase itself if you're interested in those things. But you know, verifying sources is a huge deal. And again, getting back to what Colonel Clifton said is, you know, if you're using some of those from the previous slide and it's not really right, I mean, you know, verifying yourself and doing that little additional homework can carry a lot of weight.
Yeah, and that's good. Yep. Okay. Hey, let's talk real quick about the 36 ID writing competition. I know Matt has a plug he wants to make for this. Matt, over to you, brother.
Yeah, so 3 points really on this slide. So you see at the top there, the competition is opened at 1 March and doesn't close until 31 August. So you ask yourself, how do I get involved in this competition? So you can see beneath that there are 3 options for you. Quickfire Net, number 1, that Adventure, number 2, and then number 3, I think would probably be the most helpful for the division. You've got man, equip, and train categories. You can pull one of those topics to write your paper about. Beneath that, it's got 4 bullet points that kind of outlines how the competition is going to be run and how you win. How you would win the competition. So finally, at the bottom there, if anyone has any questions on these, or if you have a submission for that 3rd category, Colonel Hildebrand, myself, and Colonel Clifton's emails are there to submit to. Although don't send it to the that mail for Colonel Clifton. We'll get a new address on there, but
Oh yeah.
that's how you submit those submissions.
Yeah. I was just trying to see if you guys were following the citations to see if that was correct or not.
AI must have done that one.
Yes, of course. All right, and then
You took that critique very well,
yes,
sir.
very well done. Yes. So, and then last thing, hey folks, before we part, I know I just want to, and I'm gonna turn it over to the Chief in just a sec for closing information about our next episode. But hey, you heard me talk about at the beginning of this episode. INGAT is this weekend, National Guard Association of Texas. They have an amazing conference going on here in Houston. Be on the lookout for people going on the road. Get out there, go see the INGAT, do the annual meeting, go to the general session, check out the exhibitors. Hey, a special note on Saturday, the 29th, for all you Army folks, there's an Army breakout at 1300 with our very own Commanding General, Major General Brad Mullen, who's going to talk big war stuff. Let's go. And then there's the air breakout 1300, 1350 for the Air Force folks. So hope to see you there. I'll be in and about checking all that stuff out this weekend. And Chief, over to you for information about the next session.
Roger that, sir. Appreciate everybody. Everybody on the net right now. The next warp drive session will be April 10th. Same guard time, same guard channel. Tune in for more information, sir. This would be episode 6. I know we skipped episode 4 due to some difficulties there, but so we'll kind of look to make that one up at some point. But April 10th, and I think there's actually 2 in April, and we'll put that information out, sir. So
yeah, right on. Thanks for that, Chief. And we did skip session 4. We had to do a reschedule. Our guest was not available after all. John Spencer, he moves around and does a lot of great reporting. So we do have him back on the docket. And so you'll see session 4 come back in as like session 8.5 or something like that. So be on the lookout for that. Be on the lookout next session. Hope to see you guys again soon. Thank you to everyone at the Riding Roundtable. You guys are awesome. I'm signing off. Y'all have a good one.
take care.
See you.